All right, Cousin Tone. We are joined tonight by the queen of the Philly sports scene. She's a super card collector, she's a wife, and she's always chasing a legend who holds a special place in Cousin Tony and I's heart. I'm referring to Debbie Ubley, aka Always Chasing Utley. Welcome, Debbie, to the Cousins Collectibles podcast. How you doing today?
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent, excellent. We're we're super excited that you could be here. It's been a long time in the making. We met a long time ago. We're going to get into that, how we met. But let's tell our audience how we met, basically, and a little bit about yourself, your background. What what made you get into collecting? How did you start, and where you're at now today?
Yeah, so I've been collecting some form of sports memorabilia, I shall say, since I was about 10 years old. The 93 Phillies were my first, experience with really loving a sports team. Darren Dalton was my guy when I was a kid. And my dad and I really, he loved collecting autographed baseballs. And he hadn't really collected until I came along. So it was something we did together. Went to a lot of card shows at the malls and, locally. We never went to anything like the National or anything like that. But we did a lot of autographing, and so, and then as I got, a little older, taking me to games and, pushing my way to the front to get an autograph. So I collected, and I also always collected cards. He was never a card collector, always an autograph collector. But I liked collecting cards. So I had my books and my binders, and I still have most of those cards from when I was a kid. Again, mostly like 93 guys. So a lot of Kruk, a lot of
Mhm.
Dalton, a lot of Dykstra, those guys.
Mhm.
And then, like most, I still dabbled, especially like I would collect with my dad. Always got him gifts during the holidays and stuff when I was, high school, college. But I definitely took a break, where I just, focused on other things in life. And I know that's always the story, right? You collect when you're a kid, you get into high school or college, and, you kind of take a break from it. So after I graduated, I went to the College of New Jersey. And I took a gap year. I wanted to go to medical school, but wanted to finish college and, enjoy my senior year. So I worked at Campbell's Soup Company, truly, when I had a gap year before I started med school. And during that year, it just so happened that, the Phillies were sort of the start of something special. So 2005, 2006, really the first years of Chase. And a lot of the guys got to see, Ryan Howard's Rookie of the Year and his, NL MVP year, and all of that was sort of going on. So I, had expendable income, and I was around and went to a lot of ball games, saw a lot of games on the road. And then I started, picking up, collecting again. And so I still collect, like I said, memorabilia with my dad. He has a pretty stellar autographed baseball collection. And, I have always, though, gotten into cards. And then as, more of a young adult, I could afford a lot of cards that I certainly couldn't handle as a kid, but also the market changed. All the autographed and game used cards that didn't really exist readily when I was a kid collector. So, and since then I've been buying into breaks here and there and buying cards off of eBay. And it's been a collection, like I said, since '05 really is kind of when things took off.
Now I gotta ask you, it's always been on the top of my mind. How did Debbie find Cousins Collectibles? Now we did meet at the Fishtown Card Show, but I want to know before that how you came into contact, with our podcast and how you started listening.
So you can thank your friend John Newman for that. I was
Okay.
listening to his podcast and I was like, who are these Philly guys on this podcast? And it's true. I had been looking for some new podcasts for sports collecting. One that I had followed pretty religiously. Hung up, I've hung in the towel, so to speak, and had stopped their podcast. And And so I started to just listen to a lot of different stuff. But yeah, John Newman's podcast was really what linked me to you. And then, I started listening to your podcast, and then that led us to the Fishtown card show where we finally got to meet.
And when we met, it was funny. It's because cousin Tony and I, we never really know what to expect with the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Who's listening? Is anybody listening? Are we important in any sort of fashion when it comes to the hobby? So when we went to the Fishtown Card Show for the first time and actually set up, and we met, and you started talking, and it really touched us because, like I said, anytime you can hear something about your content that it's somebody's listening and actually enjoys it, it's always a positive. And I know for Tony and I, it puts smile on our faces because it's crazy. And then, just like I said, meeting you, it was unbelievable. And for the Fishtown Card Show, how was that for you, that first time going there?
It's great. That was my first experience, and it was nice to have a local card show, an
Mhm.
easy
Yeah.
to get to card show. Not anything against the Philly show. I love the Philly show, but more of a trek out either the Turnpike or 76. So I love the venue. And a good decent size too. So it's not like an all day commitment to go out there, and a lot of, seeing a lot of the local vendors was nice. So yeah, always try to get out there for that show.
Yeah, for sure. You guys, like I said, we can't say enough about Brett's shows. If you guys haven't been there yet, definitely check it out. Now, before we get too far into the weeds with the collecting habits, we definitely want to touch on the current utopia. Although at the time of recording, the Phillies did take an L today, but we're gonna look past that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the current Philadelphia sports scene, it's a happening, So
Pretty good
how are
time to be alive in Philadelphia.
absolutely,
Sure.
absolutely. So how are you feeling about the Phillies and the Eagles? And what do you think about the upcoming seasons of the Flyers and the Sixers?
Um, everything the Phillies do from here on out is gravy to me. I was thrilled that they got over the hump into the postseason. And I thought that they could beat the Cardinals. I thought that was a matchup that they had.
Mhm.
I did not foresee them beating the Braves. I don't think a lot of people do. And if they admit that they did, they should have put some serious money on that. But yeah, I mean, I think they have an absolute shot to hit the World Series. And, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing ride. I love baseball. So when the Phillies are lousy, I watch the Phillies. Like, it's just, they're my team.
Yes.
As for all the other teams, I mean, the Eagles, again, have just been impressive from the get-go. We are big Jalen Hurts people in this house.
Yes,
My
yes.
husband would be happy to, declare that he has loved Jalen Hurts from day one of his college career, and has followed him since. But we're big Jalen Hurts believers in this household. So I love the team. I love the chemistry. I'm sure you guys saw today, like Jason Kelsey's got a Christmas song coming out
Yeah.
with Lane Johnson and like Baylada. They just, they have a great chemistry. And they always look like they're having a good time out there. They really do. They just seem loose, which is awesome. And fun to watch. It really is. It's just a great team. Sixers, I will admit I did not catch a lick of their game tonight because I was watching the Phils game before coming on with you guys. They have a lot of expectations to live up to. That's sort of they've got that pressure on, similar to what the Phillies did in the sense that, like, they say, oh, you got this, like, very expensive team and you got all these superstars and now you got to make it happen. And they get there, but they got to get past, the second round. Like, they have to move into the conference finals, and really they got to get to the finals. I mean, you got to see Embiid in the finals.
Yeah. That's the main thing. To me, it's finals or bust. I mean, honestly, championship. We went through this whole thing with the process and doing all that. And if we were to have another crappy year, it'd be like, what was all that for? All those years just spent losing and draft picks and Ben Simmons and the drama and all the nonsense. And man, that would be a complete, how many years was that?
If they have a slow start, that's going to be exactly it. Everybody's going to be all like, what is this? All these names and, all this money, and they got to make this work. And, they have that weight to carry, as opposed to our Flyers, who are 3-0 and have no any thought that was going to happen in a million years. I know your buddy and my buddy Neil's probably thrilled about all this.
The commish, he's like he doesn't know what to think because he's happy they're winning, but on the same token, he's like they should be losing to go ahead and tank for who is the gentleman that's coming out? I guess he's the next
Oh,
Gretzky or something.
yeah. You're gonna have to have a phone a friend. I'm not hockey prospecting
Yeah.
is not my
Yeah,
forte.
yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I mean, anything that they do will be fun because the expectations are low with them. But
Mhm.
I enjoy hockey. Hockey's always fun to see in person too. I think you appreciate what those guys do when you see it live. It doesn't as transmit as well on television.
Mhm.
Like football, you see the game from all aspects on TV, but hockey, I feel like just when you're in there in person, it's cold. You see how fast those guys are going and how hard they hit.
Right. Yeah.
Something special.
It's wild because it's definitely fun when your teams are good. Like I can't imagine like being a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. Because I'm like, dude, they don't even have it, and like the ownership doesn't care that they don't even. It's and sorry if anybody out there is a Pirates fan, but they're the ones who come to my mind like right away because it's like they like the ownership straight up does not care, like they don't give a crap, and I'm like, man, how could you like? And Pittsburgh's like they got the Steelers, and they like that wouldn't fly on the other side. But I'm like, man, so it's definitely cool when your teams are good and enjoy the ride, yeah, because it's
Absolutely.
those bad seasons. When they do come around, they seem to last forever. So just
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that we got your fandom established, talking a little bit about Philly sports, why don't we get a little bit more detail on your PC?
Yeah.
What is it about Chase Utley that you're always chasing, Mr. Utley? Tell me about that. How did you become, focused on Chase?
So as mentioned, I kind of fell back into baseball and the hobby when the Phillies were going through, a rebuild and then, really taking off from that rebuild. So in terms of Chase, he really was. He was just one of the up and coming guys. You had Rollins, you had Howard, you had Utley, and you had Hamels, right? Those were the
I
guys.
mean, other than being a handsome devil,
Oh,
what
well,
was
I
it?
mean, listen, his good looks certainly don't hurt matters, okay? But it really wasn't about that. You mean, you guys know, just as much as the women love Chase, the men love him just as much.
That's
And
true.
it's all about the attitude, right? So
Mhm.
he was always the lead by example guy. Wasn't flashy. You would go to Jimmy or you would go to Ryan Howard for your quotes after the game in terms of, we're the team to beat and what the interviews.
Right.
And Chase just went out there and played ball, and but it was always special. He always gave 110% of himself. And I think that's really what the people in Philly appreciated the most is even if he missed a play, he had dirt all over his uniform trying to make that play, and so and he I think a lot's to be said when guys show he showed that he cared, but without having like a temper tantrum on the field,
Yeah.
and he was a smart ball player. And so, that was part of it was, just really just fell in love with watching him play. And he was, second base there was a lot of second basemen that were talented at that time. Ricky Weeks, you had Robinson Cano, this is all obviously pre his suspensions and PED stuff. And, a lot of those guys, Brian Roberts on the Orioles, like second base was like a fun, there's a lot of flashy leather going on. Brandon Phillips, like another great guy who played, for decade. But yeah, so I kind of just, loved Chase, just loved watching him. Honestly, I collected all the Phillies back then. I collected a lot of I have a ton of, Ryan and Jimmy and Hamill's stuff as well, but I always leaned to trying to get as much of the Utley stuff as I could. And it's particularly when it came to like the higher end stuff of the autographs. And I'd say, once they won the championship, it definitely, became tougher. His stuff, was always sought after. And so, from there on out, I just started to build, the PC.
Nice. And he, like I said before, he definitely has one of the most famous quotes in Philadelphia sports history. So,
For sure, for
yeah,
sure. I mean, that in of itself is just, I mean, you would have never thought, right? You would have never thought he would have been the
right,
guy to say something like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
on
that was
TV,
funny.
but
yeah,
He
it's
epitomized
perfect.
the Philly athlete. But like you said, that day when he came out and said that, it was just like, whoa.
Mhm.
Everybody's like, what?
yeah, yeah. You definitely don't
And
expect him.
and like I don't know him in any way, shape, or form personally. I've met him at the Phillies festivals a couple of times, had things signed, had a picture with him, like that kind of stuff. But certainly don't know him personally. But from everything that you read, about him and his teammates, they say like he is that guy. He comes off as quiet, but he is
Mhm.
very much like snarky and sarcastic and always has something smart ass to say. And I mean, it's perfect. It's perfect for Philly.
Sounds like Tony.
I like that. I like that.
Hey, Debbie, before we get on, how many cards do you think you have of Chase?
I've not counted. I've not counted. I have, a couple of cases of sort of higher end Chase stuff.
Nice.
So if I really had to take a stab at it, and again, I don't know exactly how many cards he has. I'm not like up to date on trading card database by any means. Um, I would guess I have at least probably somewhere around 1,500 cards, if not closer to two. But I have a lot of duplicates. Like if I see and people on Twitter who see me, like I always get tagged if there's like an Utley card, even if it's like I have that rookie card or I have that. But like a lot of times I just buy them to hoard them, but really
Yeah.
just to have them because I don't often take stock of a lot of what I have either, which is part of my biggest problem is the
Gotcha.
organization part.
Yeah, you hear that, Commish? The bar's been set. I know
Yeah,
he's starting an Utley PC, but
he is.
yeah,
I told him
he
I'd
is.
be happy to help him with that.
Yeah, I'm sure that yeah, he's something else, man. He's got a big it's Lindros and all those guys. But now let me ask you, piggybacking off the Utley thing, you at the national, you took the Chase Utley quiz
Yeah,
with the women of the hobby. How'd that come about, and did you pass with flying colors?
I did. I did not know I was getting quizzed, but Sam from the group had direct messaged me on Instagram and just said like, "Hey, if you're going to be are you going to be at the national?" And was looking to speak with a couple of the female collectors
Mhm.
that they hadn't met or hadn't had on their own podcast. So we met up. Although I will say that the Wi-Fi and the connection at the show was a little challenging in terms of trying to meet up. So we wound up meeting up at the Women of the Hobby booth, and it
Mhm.
all worked out. And so yeah, I did not know she was going to spring the quiz on me, and I had no preparation, and I was sort of mortified that I'm going to like fail this quiz miserably. But I did do pretty well. Did do pretty
Nice.
well, I'll say.
Nice. That whole women of the hobby thing, that's awesome, man. That they, it's like a community within the community. Like they
Yeah.
do a really good job of reaching out and all that stuff. So that's nice to see that.
There's a lot of unique collectors. I know that some of the, you know, women of the hobby, sometimes like what is seen are those who, may be working in the business
Mhm.
and that's great. And a lot of great collectors who are in the business of the hobby as well. But it's nice to get to meet people who just, love the hobby, not doing it for necessarily financial reasons or anything like that. And they just, and then just getting to see what different people collect, like
Yeah.
obviously you guys have collections involving sports and Stranger Things and, you know, exactly, like all sorts of stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably a whole, that's a whole different conversation as opposed if you meet a female who's there just to she's working for the company, she's there to pitch
right.
whatever product. No, you're talking about the cars, the players, and things like that. So that's a more fun conversation to me than, oh, here's the special we're running on, whatever. So
Well, I'll say this too. So, and I know most of the women of the hobby can attest to this one way or the other. There are still people that, talk to, I go to a show, I'm walking around with my husband at the show, and they talk to him. And
yeah,
they talk to him, and like he always is like, actually, my wife is the collector. And, but they just assume that I am there, just to support him as a collector.
sure.
And you see it time and time again. I think that things have 100% gotten better. Like there's been a big change and a shift. And it's rare that you get, talked down to. But I was wearing like a Chase Utley shirt at the Philly show. And I actually went to the Philly show by myself. My husband was under the weather at the time and it just wasn't working out. So I walked around the Philly show and, I had one guy be like, oh, that Chase Utley, what a good looking guy. And like, because I was wearing an Utley shirt and I was like, yeah, and like a damn fine ball player. Like, like don't just like minimize it. Like, and I don't get it. I guess, maybe other men can speak to it. Just the assumption with that. But then, for as many, guys or people who do that, there's a ton of very supportive men in the hobby for us women collectors. And so I will say like that shift has clearly gone. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Gotcha. Let me ask you. So let's say you go to the booth, guy standing behind the counter there, and there he has an Utley card that you've been chasing for a while, and and he, hey sweetheart, that type of crap, yeah, what's your how you handling that?
It depends on the price of the card, right? So if I think that if it's something I want, like I'm not gonna, I'll buy it. But no, it's a definite deterrent. Like if somebody's talking, down or just, and hey, little lady, yeah, no, like you just walk away. It's just not worth your time. But as I said, like we see it all the time. My husband is, notes it all the time that people just look at him and they go, oh, it must be his collection. And it's the exact opposite. He's there looking for things that I might like. And certainly he started to collect a few things himself, but nothing to the sheer scope and size of what I collect.
So speaking of the National, I mean, as big as it was, and it was huge, somehow, some way, Debbie and the cousins kept bumping into each other. It must have been like 4 times in one day. So it was ridiculous the amount of times that we bumped into each other. You were there with your husband, who's a great guy, by the way. So kudos to you on that.
Yeah,
now,
shout out to Andrew.
Shout out to Andrew in the house. Now, like you just mentioned it, you're the collector. So what has he started to collect? What's he doing now?
So he is originally actually grew up in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And so he is a big University of Illinois fan. He would say that is his number one team, no matter if it's football or basketball or whatnot, they are his team. So he has started to collect former players or those who are in uniform from, Illinois. So the biggest name I would say that has hit the market, of course, is Io, Chicago Bulls star Io DeSumo. So that has been, in fact, as I say that, there's an IO card sitting right next to me. But he prefers to have them not in their like professional gear, but in their, university clothes.
Okay.
So that's kind of fun. There's a lot, and it's actually certainly cheaper when it comes to some of the big names, especially when the NBA cards, because you get a lot of stuff with the university colors that are, a fraction of his Bulls cards. So,
yeah, I was about to say that.
So he started to collect that. And then he's also a Chicago White Sox fan, to which, they had a very down year this year, disappointing year this year. But I have collected White Sox cards now for the past couple of years, whether it be, buying into breaks or, collecting just some cards from their team. Obviously, like a lot of Luis Robert, Michael Kopech's my guy, mostly because Andrew and I happened to be in Chicago visiting. We were on vacation just visiting Chicago, had tickets to a random White Sox game, and it wound up being Michael Kopech's debut. So we, I'll dabble with White Sox cards as well for him, and he'll look, around. But most of his collection now is just sort of Illini. Everything's Illini.
Nice. Now, where do you do your most damage? Is it online? Is it, doing your breaks, or is it at card shows? What are you doing your most damage on?
So historically, I was I got into breaks early. And I say early, but I guess, relative, it's all relative. It certainly wasn't like a 2020 phenomenon. I'm friends with Chris, who runs Kraken Wax, which is one of the breakers. And he's been around since 2009, 2010, and doing breaks on YouTube and such. And so I was an early adopter and bought into a lot of his breaks. And still do. I certainly can't buy into every break he does. And, he's sort of expanded, especially with like loop and things. But I did. So that was actually how I got a lot of cards, is because I would just be like, oh, he did a lot of team stuff. So it would be like, I'll take the Phillies. I'll take the Phillies. I'll take the Phillies. So I would get, we're breaking a case of, Chrome. I'll take the Phillies. And that went through its ebbs and flows too, right? So like you had like when Halliday and Lee and Utley and Rollins and stuff were still around, they were pricey. Then you had the rebuild years, and then Harper came around and things, went up again. So a lot of my core cards are there. And then, now I very much rely on eBay is a big one. Still, I know we all have our feelings on eBay, but it still is the sort of the biggest market to find things. And, a lot of connections through hobby Twitter, hobby Instagram. I am not on hobby TikTok, maybe one day. But I haven't ventured that way yet. So, but people know now that I, collect Chase and Phillies in general. And so sometimes I'm, tagged a lot in things that they, think of me for.
Now, do you prefer raw or do you like graded cards?
I prefer raw. I do like graded cards. Graded cards, I have not sent in cards myself to be graded. I probably should. I've always been a little daunted by it. I know that it's, for a lot of people, they feel that way.
Yeah.
But I also I'm not looking to sell most of my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have some graded cards of Chases, mostly rookie cards, which are in some cases a lot harder to come by. And I do enjoy looking at slabs, and sometimes I'll pick up stuff like, I have some Lou Bob rookies. I have, some Harper cards that are graded. I have like one of his, rookies graded, but it's complicated. And like I said, most of my cards of Chases are definitely not graded. That is probably less than 5% of my collection. So
yeah, gotcha. Yeah, well, and with the prices going down now, it is a little more affordable for all of us. So we actually just we actually just sent in a group submission. So we'll see how that goes. Nothing crazy.
I think I'm eager to see how it goes for you guys. And I think it's nice that the prices are coming down. So I've thought about that for some, even just some random variation cards, or maybe some like Bowman color rookies that I have that are numbered, that I was just like, especially if they're not personal for my collection. So maybe they're not Utley cards, or, I'm just trying to, make sure they're secure so that if I do opt to move them at some point,
Yeah, for sure. Now, I want to ask you about a particular piece of your PC that, quite frankly, has me a little jealous. Because first it was Oz getting one. Then shortly after, I see you got yours. And I'm like, oh, I feel like Cousin Los the collector when Oz used to show up with all those He-Man that, But talking about that 1-on-1 Chase Utley art card by our guy, Ken Carl.
Yeah.
Is that thing? Look at that thing. So you guys see it on YouTube. Is that thing as beautiful in hand as it is on the screen? Because
it absolutely is. It's stunning. So I had reached out. To Ken. I had watched his stuff for a few years, and always said to myself oh, I'm gonna eventually reach out and have a card done. And I just never got around to it. And so early in the year, still had some of that holiday money in my pocket, and I was like, you know what? This is the time to do this. So I reached out. He books out. I'm sure you guys know he books out. So it's probably, January, February. And he's like, well, my calendar's open for August. And I'm like, okay, put me in. And then it was just more of a, waiting for his call. But I always knew I wanted to have a piece of his in my collection. And then, you know, when it came and he sent sort of a mock-ups of here's kind of what I'm thinking, that was really hard because, you know, he sent 4 mock-ups and I was like, I want them all. And obviously I wasn't going to get them all.
Can we do
I'd have
all?
been waiting for another like year and a half to have them all. But, you know, opted to go with, you know, had the thought that, you know, when you think of Chase Utley, you know, you predominantly think of his bat. So I wanted to go with more of like, you know, him with bat in hand, 5 home runs in the '09 World Series and like all, you know, that's what I wanted to, you know, depict. And it couldn't have come out like it's perfect. It's exactly what I would have, you know, dreamt of.
Yeah. Now, did you submit pictures to him or did he do that on his own?
Nope. Did it all on his own.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
All I requested was that I wanted him depicted in a Phillies uniform. And that's not to say like I collect Chase in the Dodgers gear. Like I followed and continued to collect him when he was a Dodger. But for this, I wanted him in a Phillies uniform.
Sure. Yeah.
At least for my first.
Gotcha.
My first Ken Carl.
Yeah. And you can, like I said, I'm like, all right. I mean, mine is, it'll be here. I think it's actually the weight it adds further. Cause I mean, when you see he's posting, you know, his stuff and we're going to keep pumping Ken Carl stuff here. I don't care who.
Oh yeah.
I don't care. Like,
so
if you get
Andrew
mad,
and I did get
pumping
to
it.
meet him at the National as well, which was great. And I, at the time, you know, this hadn't been done yet. So I was like, oh, you know, I'm waiting for your call. I know it's July. I'm waiting for your call next month to do the Utley piece. And he, you know, was like, oh my God. And he, you know, and then we talked about like, you know, what he had coming up between basically like then and finishing, you know, getting to me. But yeah, I mean, his stuff is incredible. And I wound up like, you know, I saw that he was saying when we were at the National that he had sold like the Bryce Harper piece. And actually he posted it just, I think it was either today or late yesterday when Harper had the game, the amazing game. And, you know, so then like he was like, I just sold this piece. And I was like, I probably would have bought it. Honestly, I probably would have picked it up no different than you picking up the AI piece at the National.
Yeah.
Had I just had access to it, but of course it went quick. So,
you know, I got that AI piece and now I commissioned the 11 from Stranger Things. So I'm just, man, every day I'm just dying to hear something. Cause it's funny. He was like, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I never finished watching the whole, you know, 4 seasons. I think he said he had gotten through like the first one and maybe a little bit of the second. So then he started texting me. He's like, just send me a couple pictures, what you're looking at. I was like, all right, cool. You know, what I'm thinking about doing. And then like within a week or so, he's like, yeah, I just binged the whole Stranger Things, man. He goes, I got so many ideas popping in my head right now. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. So
that's just it. It's like, you know, which version of Millie Bobby Brown are you going to get? Are you getting season 1, season 2?
Yeah, I have no idea. Cause I sent him like 4 you know, the classic pose. Cause I want to see her with the nosebleed and the hand up doing something, but it's like, which one do you want? You know? And I can't wait. That's going
to be great. No doubt.
You know, so speaking of special things, we saw you on IG that you went to Phillies game. You got to meet the likes of Milt Thompson, Mickey Morandini, Gary Matthews, and the guy who we think is the greatest third baseman of all time. I'm talking about number 20, Mr. Michael Jack Schmidt. How was that experience for you?
Surprising and incredible. So I was invited to go to a game, and actually we had been talking. Friends of ours own a suite at the Phillies. This is true. You know, but and so they had asked like early, like, oh, which game do you want to come to this year? And I said, oh, put me down for like one of the Angels games. Like I didn't care which game in the series. I just wanted to see Trout and Ohtani. So that weekend, that Saturday, you know, we were set to go to see them. And they had called earlier in the week and said, oh, the Phillies, you know, are inviting some of us, you know, suite holders, so to speak, to have like a little like cocktail hour beforehand. And some of the Phillies players from yesteryear will be there, like kind of just, you know, no big thing. But if you want to go when the gates open, meet us up at the Hall of Fame Club. So sure enough, met Nancy and Dave there. And so when we first get in, you know, yeah, you're having a beer with Mickey Morandini, you know, Milt Thompson's there, Gary Matthews was there, like, you know, all just, you know, hanging out. Probably about 25 people in total in the room. And so, you know, we took some hors d'oeuvres. We're sitting outside on this like patio, like kind of overlooking Wells Fargo Center and all this. And then all of a sudden there's like all this kind of commotion, like, oh, and everybody's like sort of frazzled and sort of running. And we look, and there comes Michael Jack Schmidt. And it was just like, of course, everybody like is fangirling over, the greatest third baseman of all time. And so, we go up, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I couldn't believe he was signing autographs, which,
Oh, really?
if you've ever seen Schmidt at a Phillies event, he's usually more of the picture taker with the fans, but less so with the ink. And so he was signing autographs and taking pictures. And I don't ever go to a Phillies game without a baseball in hand.
Nice.
So I always have a ball. I always have a Sharpie. I always have a ballpoint pen.
Nice.
I come prepared. And so in this case, I did. He signed a baseball for us. And then, I first asked for a picture. And so we took the selfie, and then I asked for another picture of just him and I. And I was like, yeah, Andrew, get out of here. But no, it was great. And he couldn't have been nicer. And so, started telling stories about John Vukovic with Andrew, and like talking about him. And it was great. And so, it was just nice to have like a conversation with him for even, a few minutes. And then we went and saw the Phillies, beat the Angels. It was
nice.
Just an all around great
on the
day. Cake. Yeah, it was all around great day.
I want to give a shout out to Andrew, because it's kind of like every time I see you, you're kind of pushing him away, like the pictures. So I want to give him a shout out for being patient and for allowing you to do that, because most husbands.
He is in plenty of photographs with me and my, sports fandom and, all of that. He is. He's a good sport.
He's a great guy.
Right when our son was born that year, this was sort of pre-COVID, we took Luke to the Philly show and met Andrew McCutchen and did like one of the photo booths. So there's Luke at like 3 or 4 months old being propped up against, Kutch. And, it's a family photo with Kutch there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's a good sport, though. He really is. He very much supports, all of my crazy sportsdom. And I try to do my best to support his crazy sportsdom as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. That actually leads us right into the next question. I said we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about that big part of your life. And we're talking about that certain young man. And I was like, this kid, he probably smiles when he sleeps, because every time I see a picture of him, he's always smiling. So like, how do you balance work and hobby life, all while raising that boy the right way? And by the right way, we mean as a Philadelphia fan.
It's challenging. It is challenging, all the time. I will say, there's no handbook for kids, right? They tell you that, and then they really, every day I feel like I'm just, I like, it's just something new, or he says something, or I see some aspect of myself in him. It's crazy. Parenthood is wild. As for, hobby and collecting and all of that. So he is aware of baseball and football, and he knows the Phillies, and he knows the Eagles, and he certainly knows the Fanatic. He loves the Fanatic. But he's not really one to, really watch. He kind of more gets upset that Peppa Pig's not on if the Phillies game is on, But that said, we've not taken him to a Major League Baseball game. We have taken him to a minor league game. Just thought that was like, a little more space for him to run around, a little bit more kid family friendly. And just as I expected, he got his ice cream, he got his popcorn, he watched for like 2 innings, and then he was ready to go home. And that was exactly what we were figuring. He's 3, that's kind of what we expected. As for balancing collecting and motherhood, motherhood always comes first, right? Mm-hmm. So Andrew and I consider like a day at the ballpark or a day at the card show when we have, somebody come over, and like, we're fortunate that we have family in the area. My dad and his parents and my aunt, they'll come over and look after Luke and send us out for the day. And that's kind of like our little day out, our date day to do something together. I don't get a lot of hobby time to, as I said, like organize. Got to do it, pretty much once he's in bed or goes to sleep. And so sometimes we'll do that. We'll, just spend some time sorting through cards or open a box of cards or something together. I can't wait for the day that he's, of an age that he'll want to go to the card show. and want to collect something himself and, get the binders out and all of that. I know it will be here sooner than later. But I'm just, anxiously awaiting that day.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Debbie, there's nothing more special than when your child is into what you're into. It's a beautiful thing. My daughter, the bond that we have, I have 2 daughters. My oldest one, she just got married. She's out the house. She could give 2 craps about my collection. But my younger one, she's all in, and it's just, she called me like 3 times today asking me stuff about Stranger Things or cards and things like that. So, and she listens to my podcast. She listens to our podcast,
Good. So she hears
that's great.
bones cracking, nose bleeding.
Like, don't listen to the swears. Daddy didn't mean to do that.
No, I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing. And like I said, when I first started collecting, it was something my dad and I did. We would go to the card shows on the weekends and get this, the autographed, stuff. He collects, as I said, autographed baseballs. So my dad has signed baseball from all of the 500 home run club members.
Oh,
so
wow.
including like Ruth and Mel Ott and Jimmy Fox. And so, he's got a Clemente ball. I know that I think I had mentioned that as well.
Sweet.
He's got a Pirates team ball, but it clearly has Clemente in a great spot and all that.
Nice.
But that was like a big part of growing up, was always like, collecting that kind of stuff with my dad, and was always very supportive of it and still is. So, speaking of like, he still has like Hall of Famers that he doesn't have. Living Hall of Famers, like every time somebody new is inducted, I try to pick up a ball for him, whether it be for a birthday or Father's Day or, Christmas or whatever the holiday may be.
That's awesome.
So who gets that collection?
Oh, if you ask my dad, it used to be me, but now it's Luke. Luke gets it all. Luke gets it all. I always tell him, I'm like, well, you better hope that Luke wants it all.
Yeah.
So your daughter wants it all.
Or de facto, it's going to me.
Correct. So, but no, and that's what I said. Like, I hope that Luke, I'm sure that Luke will like baseball. I'm sure that he will. But if he's not into the collecting part of it, that's okay. But I'm sure that in some way, there will be some sort of interest that he falls in love with. So maybe it'll be whatever the, current Stranger Things type television show is, or, who knows, or like a Harry Potter, something like that.
That's cool. Now, let me ask you, what's your favorite Chase card?
So my favorite Chase card, it's like picking your favorite child. So I think my favorite, just sort of, if you're like off the top of my head, the first card that came to mind is there is a Topps Heritage card that is on card autoed by both Chase and Stan the Man. So Stan Unusual. And that is probably, I have not featured that one on my Instagram page, but perhaps I will now. Pull that one out and show it off. Yeah. But that is probably my favorite, mostly because I think it's like, of that, it's numbered out of 25, I believe. But the fact that they're on card, and, I love that comparison. I just like, I think that's like, was such a great, comparison back then Stan the Man, obviously, is one of the best ball players of all time. And probably doesn't get enough talk about being one of the best ball players of all time.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's next for you. What are the cards that you're chasing? Is it going to continue to be Utley? Are you looking to expand into anything else?
So I will buy, as noted. Like, I'm always chasing Utley. So if there's something of Chase's that I don't have, there's not a specific card that I'm like, oh, I need that specific card of Chase's. I just picked up like one of his rookies. It's a Gavin Floyd, Chase Utley. I believe it's 2003 Chrome, but it's a black variation that's numbered. That I didn't have, and one came up for sale, and you don't see them much anymore. And so of course it was like, I got to have that, like I must have it, because I know I don't have it. As for what's coming, or like what I'm looking at, 2 cards. One is, I don't have the Trout rookie, right? I feel like every real good collector should have that
True.
2011 update rookie, or at least have some form of it. I just feel like you see them at shows, if you want the graded one, if you want a raw one.
Right.
But I certainly, there will come a day where I will pull the trigger on that. And the other one, and I know I had mentioned this to you, I think actually the first time I met you guys at Fishtown, I would love to get a 1952 Richie Ashburn from the top set, which, I see them of all sort of conditions, and they show up on eBay aplenty. I just, again, it's another one where I haven't decided, do I really want to, try to get that like PSA 8 or 9 and really put, invest in it, but really put some true money into it? Or do I want to just, get a raw card and, just have it? I just haven't, that's one that I will get it sooner than later. I just haven't jumped to it yet.
Yeah, that's a weird, that it's like the psyche of us collectors with that, where it's like, I want this card and there it is all the time. I see it, but I'm like, okay. But I really do want this card. Trust me, I'm telling you that I want it, but I'm just not getting it yet. And I guarantee everybody goes through that at least once or twice. It's just,
well, even like, the Trout rookie has gone up and down and up and down, right? And it's like, when is the perfect time to buy? So looking at like the prices of PSA 10 cards, at the peak pandemic, they were going for almost like 4K, maybe a little bit more than that. And now the prices have come down to where you're seeing them for like 2K. It is interesting. It's just like, it's like hitting that trigger of like, when's the right time to just, put the money into it. So my day will come. I just haven't done. I always wind up putting money into something else, or
and it's the two schools of thought. You got the quirky school of thought, which is, let me get that card as cheap as I can, and I don't care if it's bent, creased, cut, it doesn't matter, I got the card. Or the Tony, I'm going to take 10 years to make sure this is the best looking card I've ever seen in my life, and I'm going to look at 1 million copies. And so, maybe you fall in somewhere in between there. So that's always
and
a
I
challenge.
think with the vintage cards, you kind of have to go that route. I mean, you could get the one that's been in the bicycle spoke for sure. But I definitely appreciate the graded cards more, that are of the older variety. I mean, like, how many graded cards of like base Topps Chrome cards from like 2019 and 20 like hit the market, and they're a dime a dozen. But when you see like that Clemente that's PSA 7, and you're like, oh my goodness, I must have this, and I think the way that you guys have been, or I know have been talking about doing it is like, okay, I have this for now, and then when that better card comes along, you move this to get to this. And that makes sense.
I was actually just texting Oz today, and the commission, actually, we're group text that never ends, which he's actually texting us right now. But we were talking about that, because I'm like, man, I'm kind of like, right now I'm not doing what I call any big boy purchases, just kind of stuff that I like, so, and just to get me scratching that itch, and it just all goes back to that stuff. I'm like, I those Clementes and stuff like that, and they're great and they're amazing, but man, they take some doing. So and this is like, I think when you start, what for me personally, I know that like I'm enjoying the hobby because I'm buying stuff that I like, and just kind of where I'm at.
It's a complete 180 for Tony, because when Tony first started, it was his whole mindset was, he was an investor. I'm looking to get stuff that other people, I'm going to get it here for say 1,000. I'm going to sell it, 6 months from now for 1,500, 2,000, because I think this thing is hot and people will like it. Not that I like it, but I think other people are going to like it. And then he went down that rabbit hole for a while until he realized, what, let me do what's best for me and get the best possible cards, whether it's a Randall Cunningham, whether it's Roberto Clemente or Punch Out, whatever it is, you're going to get, build that specific collection to the best of your ability. And that's, with you're doing that with Chase Utley. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think too, as we talked about, being a parent and sort of having to limit your scope and time,
Mhm.
you know, it's a lot easier for me to just be like, okay, I'm, always looking for chase cards. And I certainly like I'll buy stuff, I know with the Phillies, obviously, advancing, and I bought some Tops Now cards
Okay.
this week from the game that we were at on Saturday.
Yeah.
And the Reese Hoskins bat spike and like that kind of, you have to have those cards. Like I sit there and I'm like, I
Is
must
there a
have this.
card with that? They have that card?
Oh yeah, they have that card.
Ah, that's dope.
So
Yeah.
so I picked up those cards, but generally speaking, I've been trying to be better about not buying just like any old card that,
Mhm.
I spy. But then when, and same thing with like Utley cards, I feel like it comes fewer and further, between when that like really special patch card or that auto card that I say like I definitely don't have this comes
Yeah.
along. And so it feels easier to pull the trigger when you're spending a little bit more on something that like you absolutely want if
Right.
you're not getting all the other stuff.
Yeah. And any Reading Phillies, Chase Utley?
I do think that I have. So I definitely have like his minor league, team sets. He was with the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders at the time.
Mhm.
And then, Clearwater and such. So I have some of his minor league cards for sure. And I think I do have a in-person signed card
Yeah.
of one of his like Reading cards or
Yeah.
one of the minor league cards. Yeah.
Nice.
His minor league stuff though, it's just again, it's a different world now. I mean, you think about that. He was in like the Phillies minors in like 2000, 2001,
Right.
and how far we have come as a hobby, right? Like I'm surprised there aren't like variations and like inserts in the team sets yet.
True.
Oh, you got to get your like, magenta swirl team card for the Iron Pigs or,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. If somebody from Tops is listening, there you go. So if you start
Pro
doing it, we know
debut,
where you got
baby,
it.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Magenta swirl.
Hey, so Debbie, before we get to this last question, let everybody know where they can find you at on IG or Twitter and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
So my Instagram handle for my hobby is, or my hobby account is at always chasing Utley. And then they can also find me on Twitter at Debbie25LW. And, I do a lot of more hobby twittering over there, and you'll see a lot of like Phillies retweets, especially right now. But I think that there's a lot of different ways to hobby community now, which is great. And so like I said, I haven't ventured into TikTok. I know that that's sort of a hotbed item for people too, but yeah, you can find me on Insta at always chasing Utley, Twitter Debbie25LW.
Nice, man. It's too much. Twitter, Instagram, all that, man. I mean, we're just gonna be in one place. We dabble a little bit in Twitter, but that's it. Oz, don't get any bright ideas. Like, I mean, we're not doing all that. But hey, so Debbie, let's close this out like we always do. What piece of advice would you give a mother, a wife, anything like that would want to think about getting into the hobby?
So I think, as what everyone says, right? The collect what you love is a big part of it. You have to have a passion for it. I am a firm believer that, and I know again, everybody hobbies differently, but I think that a lot of people lose their joy in the hobby when they start getting into the flip game and like really it becomes more of a business. And I have always looked at this as something that I enjoy doing away from work. I don't want my, the roof on my home to be dependent on the cards that I move or the boxes that I break. And so that is a big part of it, in terms of trying to keep it light when it's not fun anymore, or you find you're getting stressed about it. Take a break. It's okay to take a break. It's hard to not get into the FOMO of the world, right? Of you see everybody's breaking, this product or that product or going after, the hottest prospect. And, you know, it's sometimes, people have ebbs and flows of their income and what's going on in their life. And it's okay to take a break. The hobby will be there. Trust me, the hobby will be there. And so that part of it, I think, is is important. So as much as we enjoy collecting and promote, if you I made it to the national this year. I don't know when the next time I'll make it to another national, especially it being out in Chicago and Cleveland. I love those cities. I just don't know with a 3-year-old or, soon to be 4-year-old next year, if I'm going to be able to be, taking him to the national. Probably not. And the family vacation to me is more important, right? So like doing that versus making the national, the family vacation. So I just think that, trying to be careful about the fear of missing out on everything is a big part of it too. So if my best advice would be, yes, try to be careful with the fear of missing out, enjoy the hobby, okay to take a break from the hobby and take a breather from the hobby if you need to, because the hobby will be there and the hobby will always be there for you in whatever way you choose to hobby.
Fair enough. And, make a note, 4 years from now, National 2026, Luke's debut.
Absolutely.
7
And he'll
years,
be, I
7
don't know if
years
he'll
old.
be walking around with like a slab case trying to make deals.
Zion case.
Yeah. You see like this, I more power to him. But like, yeah, I can't imagine like 10-year-old, 11-year-old me, trying to make deals with these men and
he's going to
these
be a
grown
prodigy.
adults.
He's going to be a card prodigy, rocking his Zion case. Open that up. It's going to be all gold Utleys. Like what?
Yeah. And it'd be, he better not be taken into Mom's Utley collection. He'll get his own stuff.
Debbie, we appreciate you, man. This was a blast. You've been there since day one. You're one of our first fans that actually said, "Hey,
fans, this guy."
Well, whatever you want to call. I'm saying that said, "Hey, I listened to you. I'm taking in your content." So it's like, hey, that to us was like the biggest thing. Just hearing somebody say, "You guys are cool. I like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing." And like I said, so from day one, we have a special place. Just like Chase has that in your heart. Debbie, always chasing Utleys, always going to be there. Number one listener, not fan.
I appreciate it, guys. And like I said, at the time I was looking for something new to listen to in terms of the hobby. And I really do. I appreciate listening to collectors and their voices and what they're collecting and what they're interested in. Then, and that's, again, not to take away from anybody who's putting out great content about, the business side of the hobby and what to get and what, that's wonderful. But it's unique to hear the real, collector's perspective. So I appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you. Well, you're a hobby purist, and we really try to focus our show on the hobbyist. Every once in a while we'll dabble into other stuff, but the main thing is we're all collectors. And why do you collect? And why are you collecting what you love? And that's the main focus, and getting people's stories out. And again, thank you so much for partaking that. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to finish this like we always do. And that's keep focused, keep positive, and keep collecting. Hey, yo, Tone, bring the beat back.